Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Before I get to my interview with Hugh Turley about his second book on the death of Thomas Merton, really well-researched book about what was going on at the Abbey of Gethsemane. Before we get to that, I want to let you know that if you're looking for a Christmas present for yourself or others, I have a new t-shirt. There's a new store at the Catholics Against Militarism website, and I am selling t-shirts. That's right. I'm in the t-shirt business now. I would like to announce the Infallible Jesus t-shirt. You can only get it here at Catholics Against Militarism, an original design. Go spread the word. I want you to take what you're learning at this podcast, whatever you're receiving here, the message of, peace and the nonviolent love of Jesus. I want you to take that out into the real world. Let's get offline. I don't do much fundraising through this podcast. I don't monetize this podcast. I never have. I think I've done one appeal for donations in the 6 years that I've been doing this because I'm trying to do this to spread the good news, right? However, I had the idea for this t-shirt. I thought it was kind of fun. I thought it was kind of funny. And I thought it would be a great way to help spread the word, really. So if you would like to support the podcast and also have an awesome t-shirt to wear that can start great conversations with people, check out the Infallible Jesus t-shirt. And for every t-shirt or item that you buy at our new store, this podcast will receive $10. So if you're looking for a great Christmas gift, or if you just like to support the podcast, buy a t-shirt, wear it around, start some good conversations, and hopefully make people smile and make people think. All right, that's all. Now we're on to the interview. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Catholics Against Militarism podcast. My name is Ellen, and I'm so happy to be interviewing one of my favorite truth seekers and truth tellers, Hugh Turley. Hi, Hugh. So good to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Ellen.
Hugh was on the show in I think the very first year of the podcast, episode 31, and on YouTube, that interview has been seen 50,000 times. We did an interview about the death of Thomas Merton and the first book that Hugh wrote about that death, and it's my all-time highest viewed interview, and I'm so happy that I did it to help get the word out about Thomas Merton and what really happened to him. So Hugh Turley has written a follow-up book. The original book was called The Martyrdom of Thomas Merton, an Investigation. Came out in what year, Hugh?
2018.
2018. And then he has a follow-up book called Thomas Merton's Betrayers. So in today's episode, we're going to catch up on everything that has happened since the first book came out. Hugh has a lot to update you on. I have some general questions for Hugh about how his research relates to the current era that we find ourselves living in. And then toward the end of the interview, I do have some specific questions for those of you who have read the book. Some things popped out to me that I want some clarification on and I want to know more about. So I'll save those specific questions for the end. Oh, and one more thing. At the end, I would like to have a call to action of some kind. And I will explain this in the interview, but we can decide what that is at the end. But I really want there to be something that people can do after they hear this interview to help this quest for truth. With all that being said, thank you for being here, Hugh. Why did you decide to write this second book?
Well, it's followed up from the first book. Now, I just want to say a little bit about Thomas Merton first, because some people might not be familiar with him, but he was a Trappist monk. He was born in Europe in 1915. He did his primary education in Europe. And then he eventually ended up at the Columbia University, and he had a gift for writing. And there was a big influence on him by the faculty and fellow students at Columbia, and they brought him into the Catholic Church. He was baptized at Corpus Christi Church in New York. And shortly thereafter, he wanted to become a monk and live in a cloister. And he landed at Kentucky at the Abbey of Gethsemane. That would be 1941.
And before he became a monk, he was a little bit of I don't know, I want to say a wild child, but he was not a very...
He wasted a year at Cambridge before he went to Columbia.
Okay.
And he wrote an autobiography, which I'll mention in a second, but that sort of documented his early life. But there have been some rumors about his early life that aren't true.
Right. Oh, right. Like
So, I mean,
yeah,
there's some things, but sometimes after you're dead and you can't defend yourself, they can they can trash your reputation to turn people away from you. And I think that happened to Thomas Merton. Well, anyway, after he got to the monastery in 41, the abbot there, his name was Frederick Dunn, he realized that Merton was a gifted writer, and he asked him to do some writing about other monks and their history of their monastery and their order. And then he told Merton he thought he should write his own story, his own biography. And it came about sort of like, it turned out to be like Augustine's Confession, if anyone's familiar with that, because he talked about his life as a youth and how he grew up and how he became to be a Trappist monk. And this book, really nobody expected much of it, but it turned out to be a big bestseller, a huge, in fact. But just as the book came out, the abbot, Frederick Dunn, died, and a new abbot came in named James Fox. And this was a very pivotal thing, because when Fox arrived at the monastery and was elected to the abbot, he went into Louisville, because the abbey's near Louisville, Kentucky, to pay his respects to the archbishop. And when he returned, Merton had a check that he'd received. It was his first royalty check. It was for about $900, which would be about $12,000 today. So the abbot looked at the check, he looked at Merton, and he said, I want you to keep on writing. So
And this was Fox.
he did.
Right?
Yeah, this is Fox, Abbot Fox. Abbot Fox was a totally different character from Abbot Dunn. And Fox created sort of a business of the monastery where they were selling fruit cakes. They still do, candies, and they had cheese. They sold meats. They had breads. They had just a big enterprise where the monks were working, producing income for the monastery. But the biggest income producer of all was Thomas Merton, with the royalties from these books that he wrote. And he wrote books in the 50s about spirituality, prayer, and the contemplative life. One of my favorite books by him, and I only picked it up because I read that it was a seldom read book. If it's seldom read, I thought that's probably a good one. Because a lot of times the best things are ignored, and it's all about the Eucharist, and it's a great book. I recommend it. But that was written in 1956. But in 1961, his outlook changed. He had gone into the monastery to get away from the world, but when he suddenly realized that there were these people outside the monastery, that he was part of the humanity, and he loved his fellow human beings as we all should. And he took an interest in peace and nonviolence, and he started to write about peace and he opposed war and nuclear weapons. And his first article in this vein was called The Root of War. And then it was published in the Catholic Worker. And I think that sort of put him on the map as not just a spiritual writer, but a man who was a lot like Mahatma Gandhi and other men of peace. Now, Merton's books were so popular. I need to tell you how popular they were, because it's part of why he was killed. He was probably as well known as Ernest Hemingway, another famous writer at that time, which people still read. But in the Catholic homes across America, and in fact, even in non-Catholic homes, everybody had books by Thomas Merton. They were very popular. There was another man on television who's still well known, was Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. He had a weekly television program. Everybody watched it, and everybody knew who Fulton Sheen was because he was on television. Well, Merton was not on television or radio. He wasn't a public figure or speaker, but he was a very, very well-known author. So when he started to write about nonviolence and peace, it got the attention of the people that are promoting war and are favoring nuclear weapons and so on. So that got their attention, because he's not just an ordinary person saying these things. He's a well-known author who's saying these things. So he has influence. Yeah. He wrote about 10,000 letters. So he wrote letters to lots of people, private letters to people. So he was influencing a lot of people with his peace activities.
Including the 60s, Ethel Kennedy, right?
Yes, he was a friend of Ethel Kennedy. Her maiden name was Skakel. The Skakel family donated a lot of money to Abbot Fox. They put a chapel up there called the Skakel Chapel at the Abbey of Gethsemane.
Oh, okay.
They were big donors.
And
And
she
Fox
was,
was interested in the money. So
uh,
anyway, Merton corresponded with Ethel Kennedy,
yeah.
and so he was kind of connected that way. And of course, Bobby Kennedy was a man who opposed war and the war in Vietnam. And he was outspoken. He was a popular figure, as was Martin Luther King at that time. And all three men died in 1968, which sort of brings us up to where I wrote the first book, because my friends said to me, Hugh, you really need to look into Merton's death, because they knew that I'd done research in death investigations before. I'm a professional magician by trade. I fool people and I lie for a living, but I also know how to find things that are hidden, because in magic, what we do is we usually show people everything. You see everything except maybe something that's concealed. So you might see 90%. You think you see everything, but it's that little 10% that's held back that fools us. And I'm aware of that. And I'm aware that it's not just magicians that are fooling people. The national news media presents news to people, but you're not getting the full story. There's always something that they're not telling you. When you read the news, you need to look for what's not there, what's missing. Merton wrote that 9/10 of the daily news is pseudo news. Some days he said 10/10. He knew that the news media was part of the propaganda machine that promoted war. So this also made him a threat, because some of the things he was writing were critical of the press. And most of the people well, if you don't know that they're lying to you, you just, I mean, you expect to be fooled at a magic show, but when you're reading the daily paper, watching the evening news, you don't think people are going to be deceiving you.
Do you think we have a First Amendment right, freedom of speech, freedom of the press? I think
Yeah,
that, yeah,
they tell
this
you.
whole, yeah.
What's really fascinated me was that Merton is living in a cloistered monastery without a television, without a newspaper, without magazines or radio. And he's just getting information from people writing to him, or maybe the abbot would announce to the community some news, like when JFK was assassinated or something. But Merton was not exposed to that daily diet of propaganda, and it gave him a sharp insight. He processed the information differently from most people, and he knew that wars were promoted by the press and that they're part of the problem.
And his brother died in World War II, right? His
His
brother?
brother, yeah, he was in the
Yeah.
Canadian Air Force, and he died in an airplane accident. So he was keenly aware of what the media was doing, and he was telling people about it. And in addition to being anti-war, he was a critic of the press, and that made him dangerous to the people that were
You have to make sure everybody
proceeding.
believes all this stuff and doesn't
Yes,
doubt it. Yeah.
yes. So in the first book that we published, it was called The Martyrdom of Thomas Merton. I was focused, and I have a co-author, by the way. I need to mention David Martin, because
Yeah.
he and I did these things together. And I think between the two of us, he's the better writer. I did a lot of the research and digging. He always makes me write the first rough draft, but then he's good at polishing things. And he also has a keen brain that works really well, and he'll see something that I might miss. Well, we need the more eyes, the better, because the more people that look at things, especially if you know you're being fooled, the better off we are, because
Yeah.
all of us come with different background experience. And David Martin has a really good mind. So he and I wrote the first book just about Thailand, because that's where Merton died. And we get the official death documents, which were critical because they'd never been seen before. It surprised me that nobody bothered to get something as basic as a death certificate, And then the other really major discovery we made was that there were photographs taken of Merton's body. And
That was huge. Nobody knew that they really existed, right? Because
right, they didn't know that they existed. And then when they did say that they existed, Michael Mott, in a biography of Merton in 1984, mentioned that there were photographs, but he misrepresented where they were taken. He said they were taken after the scene was disturbed.
right.
But up until that point, people didn't even know about the photographs. And the photographs, I learned about them because I read a lot of letters and correspondence between the people that were there, the witnesses that were at the scene of Merton's death. And we really broke down the timeline of who found the body, who saw him last, who discovered the body, what did they see at the scene, and then, of course, the official records. So the first book is pretty much focused on Thailand. And this is one of the photographs. This is one of them of Merton's body
And
as it was discovered.
you
Now,
couldn't
they
publish
didn't touch any. They didn't touch anything. They just took that picture. They took two pictures. One of them didn't turn out because it was too dark. And in the 60s, you needed a flash bulb indoors to take a picture inside, or it would be too dark if you didn't set the speed for the film. You had the high speed film. It was a little difficult. So only one of the pictures turned out at the time. And that picture was sent to the Abbey of Gethsemane. So they had it, but they kept it a secret because they didn't want anybody to see it.
And this was another monk or priest who was living with Thomas Merton, who was one of the first two to see the body.
Right. He was a Filipino. He found he and there were three Benedictines, and they found the body. They didn't touch anything. They took photographs to show the police, but when the police showed up, they realized that this was not a real investigation because the doctor with the police said, we're going to call this natural causes to avoid complications. He told that. And they thought, well, you're not even going to do an autopsy? I mean, there's nothing. So they didn't tell them about the photographs. And then one picture that was developed was sent to the Abbey. But see, the problem with this picture is it shows a staged scene. Anybody that looks at it says, that looks staged, because it was a staged scene to look like an accident. Well, nobody expects the first people on the scene to be taking crime scene photographs. That's usually police work. But anyway, I knew about the pictures, and later I found the negatives, which were missing for 50 years. They were at Columbia University, and I found them there. And there was a negative strip, and because of the new technology with computers and digital imaging, they took the one that was too dark and they brought it up.
Oh.
So now there's two pictures of Merton's body exactly as it was discovered. And those two things, I think finding the official death documents and finding those photographs were probably the two most important discoveries that are in our first book.
And I would add that you could not publish the photos in the first book for some reason.
I can't publish them still.
Oh, and so we didn't, even though we read about them, we never got to see them. And the other thing that I think is very important about that first book is you found out that there was no autopsy ever done.
That's right.
There was maybe a lie that there had been one done, but there hadn't.
There were several. There were about 6 stories about the autopsy. For example, the abbot Flavian at the monastery would say, I knew there would be questions, so I ordered an autopsy. And then in the next sentence, he's off to another subject, which leaves the impression that he ordered one. So then you think there must have been one. Well, there never was one.
Mm.
Now, the photographs, it takes me a while to figure things out. It always does. But, I come to understand that things happen according to God's plan. Everything unfolds according to God's will. So even though we couldn't publish the photographs, it was years later that I realized, well, I can't publish them, but the news media can. Because there's a thing called fair use doctrine. And if it's for educational purposes, or it's for a magazine, or to inform, the public has a right to know. And the fair use doctrine goes around the copyright law. I can't be putting them into a book and selling the book and making a profit off something that's owned by the Abbey, because the negatives were given to the Abbey by the Filipino monk who took them. So they own the rights. Well, okay, they wouldn't give me the rights. But then I was able to get them published in several publications. They were published in a Canadian publication called Island Catholic News. Another one, or two of them, were published in an online magazine called Covert Action Magazine. And if people would go to Covert Action Magazine and search Thomas Merton, you'll see the photographs. So they're there. They're online. Also, the Irish American News, of all people, in Chicago, they published the photographs. So they know what their rights are. And they are getting out there gradually. But unfortunately, our secular press and our Catholic press, like EWTN, National Catholic Reporter, they could publish these photographs, but they don't.
Why? Because why?
Well, it's back to some things haven't changed. I mean, from the very beginning, the Catholic press repeated what was in the secular press, that Merton died of accidental electrocution, and that was the story. And everybody believed that he died by accident. Well, that story wasn't true, but nobody in the Catholic press bothered to get the death certificate. Nobody in the Catholic press bothered to do what I did and get those photographs, or even read all these letters and find out that the whole story that was invented in 1973, that Merton had taken a shower. See, they added water to say
Yeah.
that electrocuted. And let me just explain why that happened. See, when the initial story that he died of accidental electrocution sort of blames the facility that he's at and the manufacturer of the fan. And, personal injury attorneys would want to sue. And they would tell the Abbey of Gethsemane, you need to sue that fan company and that place where Merton was, because other people can get killed by fans if they're dangerous. So we need to have a lawsuit. Besides, he was a famous writer and he's bringing in lots of revenue and royalties. So you lost a lot of money, future money.
Right.
So you should sue. Well, I think there was pressure put on the Abbey. I don't know this for a fact, but I would guess that some attorneys in Kentucky said, why don't you sue?
And
well,
so
the answer to that problem was to just blame it on Merton and say, oh, well, actually, he took a shower and he was wet and he touched the fan. It's all his fault. So he was clumsy and he killed himself.
Yeah.
So now you don't have anybody to sue because it's Merton's fault. If they had sued the fan manufacturer or the Red Cross Center where Merton was staying, they would have got their lawyers up and they would have wanted an autopsy. They would have wanted to know exactly what happened before they paid any money. Well, so that's why I think the shower story was invented, that Merton was wet, which was a complete fabrication. And if in the first book we brought that forward, that the witnesses at the scene, everybody agreed that Merton did not take a shower and he wasn't wet. In fact, he's wearing his pajama shorts, in the picture where he's found. These are pajama shorts. You don't wear those in the shower. So that photograph had to be hidden.
Yeah. And you also found out that something about what happened with the trust right before you found out that he was going to leave.
The second book.
Oh,
let me go to that.
Okay. Maybe that was
we'll finish with the first book. Okay.
Okay.
Now that's all about Thailand.
Yeah.
So, and we proved that he was murdered because there's evidence of foul play. There's a bleeding wound on the back of his head that was never in any of the police reports. It wasn't mentioned by anybody, but it was seen by the witnesses. So,
and there was a super sketchy guy staying in his
there's a sketchy guy. Francois de Grun was a
really weird guy that was
strange
odd behavior. And
the Filipino monk that took the photograph said that monk gave him the creeps.
He gave me the creeps just reading about him. He was weird.
Yeah, he was a strange guy.
Yeah.
So anyway, the first book comes out in 2018 all about this murder of Thomas Merton, and that he didn't die in an accident. And officially, the Thai documents didn't say he died in an accident, and the Thai newspapers in Thailand at the time did not say it was an accidental death. So after the book came out, I sort of thought, incorrectly, but I thought that the monastery in Gethsemane has a whole different group of monks now, because that was 50 years ago. And I thought they would be interested to know that Thomas Merton didn't die by accident.
You'd think so. Yeah.
You'd think so, but that's not the case. I went down, I was writing to one of the monks, Brother Paul Quinnan, and I told him I wanted to come down and meet him. And he didn't respond to me, but I drove down anyway. And my wife, at the time I was a caregiver for her, she was pretty badly paralyzed with a form of Lou Gehrig's disease. And she was also getting dementia that was pretty bad. So it was a difficult trip for me, but in fact, it was the last trip we took. Because after I got home from that road trip, I decided I can't take her on a trip again.
I noticed that you dedicated this book to Makiko.
Yeah, we did.
That's your wife? Did she pass away?
That was my wife, yeah.
Oh.
So she was a real dear. And I had the joy of being her caregiver because I really enjoyed that. And I miss her. We had a lot of fun together. But she went down to Gethsemane with me.
Mm-hmm. And
when we arrived if you've ever been to a monastery, they have someone that's called the doorkeeper. There's always a monk that's assigned or a nun that's going to welcome the guests. Mm-hmm. So his name was Father Mulvaney, and he was there. And when we came in the door, he was at the reception. He greeted us. He was all smiles. He sees a woman in a wheelchair, And he's gracious, oh, welcome, and it's all smiles. And what can I do for you? And I said, well, I would like to see Brother Paul Quentin, who I've been writing to. He said, well, he's on a tour right now. He's not available. So then I said, well, maybe I could, is it possible to meet the abbot? And he said, do you know the abbot? And I said, no, I don't know him, but I said, he'll know my name if he'll know who I am. So because I'd written to him and asked if I could use the photographs. He said no. So anyway, he calls the abbot on the phone, and then he gets his whole face turns from smile to scowl, and he said, "You lied to me and told me you knew the abbot." And I said, "No, I never said I knew him. I said he would know me." He said, "No, you lied. You said you knew him." And I said, "That's not true." And he said, "Well, you've been rejected," he told me. "You're not welcome."
Okay.
Well, there's a rule of Benedict at the monasteries that everyone who appears there, particularly pilgrims and fellow Catholics, are to be welcomed as if they're Jesus Christ.
And who was the abbot at this time?
Abbot Elias Dietz.
Okay.
And Dietz is still the abbot.
Okay.
But he's been the abbot for quite a time. But I was shocked. And then I said, well, I'd like to meet with someone. Are there any monks available? And he said, you've been rejected. And I said, well, I drove all the way down from Maryland to Kentucky. And he did this.
Oh, wow. That's pretty sarcastic.
I said, what's that for? He said, I thought you'd like some recognition.
Ooh, okay.
This is a Catholic priest. So I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere with him. So we left. I visited Merton's grave, and then we took a 2-day drive all the way back home again. But I thought about it on the way home because it just wasn't right. And I realized, and I started to think of these monks as the brothers of Joseph in the book of Genesis. Remember, they sold him into slavery, their own brother. I mean, or why would Cain kill Abel, his own brother? I mean, what's going on here? Sacred scripture is a prophetic interpretation of today. And Merton's brothers at that abbey didn't really like him. And they don't like him now. They don't want to know the truth about him.
Even though he's their sugar daddy for all these years.
Yeah, and I wondered, well, and I had to think, and I talked to Dave Martin about it, and we decided, that if Merton's murdered in 1968, murders don't just happen on a whim. There had to be a plan. So we decided to look at a timeline. And this is what you started asking about the legacy trust, because I wondered, how did he end up in Thailand? And how did they get this cover-up story of the accidental electrocution? I wanted to know, where did the accidental electrocution story originate? It's a good question.
And I think the question about oops, sorry. I think the question about the timeline is really important too, and how he ended up over there, because he wasn't just a monk, he was a hermit, right?
Right.
So by this point, he had left the main monastery and he was living in like a little shack in the woods, and that's like a religious vocation.
Right.
And I think he could only leave to like go to doctor's appointments and stuff, right?
That's correct.
So the fact that he's like globe trotting all of a sudden, it's like, wait, why did he? What's going on? Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, it was important to find out the timeline, because I thought that would reveal some things to us. So the second book, unlike the first book, which is about Thailand, the second book is really all about Kentucky. What happened in Kentucky before and after, and what was going on, because I don't think the monks at Gethsemane murdered Thomas Merton, not by a long shot, but they did cover it up. So the people that did murder Merton had to know that they could count on the monastery to keep the lid on this thing. They had to know that they could count on them, because they needed to know that the family was not going to make a fuss or want an investigation or do an autopsy. They needed to know that they were in. So they had that they could count on. And the funny thing about their books is this second book has a subtitle. It's Thomas Merton's Betrayers. It's The Case Against Abbot James Fox and the author John Howard Griffin. Now, in the first book, because it's in Thailand, we don't even mention James Fox. He's not mentioned in there once.
Oh, really? Is he the one who lived in the fancy house?
Yes. Yeah, he got it.
His story is
He,
crazy. Like
I know.
he's like living it up there, and everyone's eating like porridge and breadcrumbs, and he's eating steak every night, and he lives in
Right.
this like palace on the side of the mountain. I thought that was in the first book, but that was in this one.
It's in the second book.
Un
Fox is not even in the index in the first book. He was never mentioned. He wasn't even on our uh, interest. It's just so the second book is another story
it's a
about
whole
Kentucky.
different story about why was it being covered up, and everyone had their the research that you did here is really important about the Abbey and
Yeah,
what was going on there.
it was fun. I just love finding things. I used to know a man in Baltimore that was a fossil broker, and he had a big thing of fossils. He would supply them to all the major universities, but he told me the joy of breaking open a rock and seeing a fern that no one had seen. And it's like, 700,000 years old. And he said, I'm looking at it. And he said, he got such a joy. I was finding something inside of a rock. And when I would find something in the Merton investigation, it was a really exciting, like to find the
I want you to
photographs.
teach. Will you teach a class for me? I teach I want you to teach research. I like this is a skill. My students think that research is typing something into the Google search bar. That's
Right.
what they think it is. They really don't know what it is. And I need somebody to teach like what research really is and the value of it. I don't think this is done well, and I think it's really important. So anyway, job offer if you want it, but we can talk about that later.
Let me tell you something, just a side. This is a side story because of
Yeah.
what you're asking. Because I was doing a talk to high school students about what you're saying, doing research, finding the truth about things. And I had just read a book by a guy named John, his name's last name was Stinnett, I forget his first name. Was it James or John Stinnett? Anyway, this fellow Stinnett wrote a book about Pearl Harbor. And his hypothesis was that the Americans knew in advance, see, and
Mhm.
they cracked this code. And anyway, it was an interesting book to read, but it was just the opposite of another book called At Dawn We Slept by Gordon Prang. And both Stinnett and Prang were both Navy pilots in World War II. And they had two different viewpoints of Pearl Harbor. Well, when I was showing this book by Stinnett to the students, and I showed them at chapter 4, there's a footnote here. Actually, it would be an end note, the notes from the back of the book. And I said, this end note is to a document at the National Archives. And if you're doing research, you would want to go to the archives and find the documents. You'd have there's an actual document, I said, that goes with this end note. Well, I don't live far from the archives. So I was going to get the document and I was going to bring it to the students and show it to them, right? To show them this is so you can actually get this. There was a man, he's no longer there, but he was about 86 at the time, named John Taylor. And he was the Pearl Harbor guy. I mean, all of the Japanese and all the scholars that studied Pearl Harbor would see John Taylor. And his little cubicle had all these books about Pearl Harbor. So I went in the cubicle with him. He was a really nice man. I said, Mr. Taylor, I said, I've been reading Stinnett's book and I'm looking for a document. And he looked at me and he said, I know what you're looking for. I said, you do? He said, yeah. He said, chapter 4. And I said, that's right. He said, yeah, it's not here. I said, what do you mean? He said, Stinnett references a lot of documents at the archives that we don't have.
Really?
I couldn't believe it.
So he was making it up, do you think?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Or I
Yeah,
thought maybe he
wow.
got rid of the documents, like to hide them or something, but
No, they never existed, as far as I
oh,
know. I mean, he said that they're there. They should be there.
right.
But the Pearl Harbor guy said Stinnett references a lot of things that we don't have that he says are here.
That is a story that my students need to hear.
And then, see, when I went to talk to the students, and I was going to show them the document. I said, I can't show it to you. It's not there. And I said, if you read this book, and a lot of people read books, they see the end notes in the back, and they just assume that that's what it is.
Right.
In fact, Mott's biography of Merton, the seven mountains of Thomas Merton, published in 84. Mott's papers are at Northwestern, and he references things that he references the wrong documents. He has things in his book that I know the document he got it from, but he references a different document.
Oh, so this is why researchers have to cross-check each other, and there's,
Yeah,
yeah,
really.
yeah,
And just because somebody's got endnotes or footnotes doesn't mean anything.
right. That's really good. Okay, so I want
And
you to talk about my
you want to get source documents. If you're going to do research, it's like I found the death certificate for Thomas Merton. You know, Brother Patrick Hart, who lived at the Abbey, because somebody said that he told people that the death certificate said accidental electrocution. He just said that.
Mhm.
Well, you can't take his word for it. You got to get the death certificate and look at it.
Yeah,
It doesn't say accidental electrocution. He wasn't telling us the truth. So, yeah, so the original source documents are really important to get. And if I was to teach a class or tell your class about that, that's something we would want to do and give them some type of assignments where they could go and find actual documents, like
yes,
when you might read about a crime in the newspaper, but what you want to do is you want to get the actual police report and read the witness statements. And
yes,
even maybe sometimes go and ask the witness, is this what you told the police? They might say, no, I didn't tell them that. They
right,
falsified what my statement.
right.
This is this is this is objective reality is I just really like finding the actual truth about things. But
Mhm.
Stinnett's book was quite a lesson for me because I was sympathetic to his hypothesis that we knew in advance, but and I wondered why would he do that? It's a good question. I think his book is what I would call self-discrediting,
Mhm.
where he has this argument that the Americans knew in advance, but then if you dissect his book, you can say, oh, but Stinnett's not using genuine stuff, so don't take his word.
Mm.
So then it was a surprise attack.
So you think it was a surprise attack after all?
Well, I think if you can discredit Stinnett, you
Yeah,
can make the
right,
argument that it was a surprise attack.
right.
But see, Stinnett, sometimes people don't use the best evidence; they use weak evidence, and their purpose is really to undermine the position.
So they
Stinn's
look
book
like
is
they're
very
arguing
sneaky.
for something, but by making a weak argument, they're actually doing work for the other side.
Exactly,
It's
exactly.
so it's so convoluted. Okay, we have less than a minute left. And I
We'll have
have
to
I have to
continue.
wait 10 minutes before sending you another link. So we'll take a 10-minute break and then
Okay.
come back and pick up where we left off.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that question about doing research. I had to tell you the Stinnett story.
I love that. No, I'm going to share that with my students and because they need to know how to do this. And I think it's going to get even harder with just digital records and stuff that can be memory hold so easily. Like I just wonder what research is going to look like in 50 years, but I just want people out there who know how to do it, right? Like I think it's a lost art, and I personally have never really done that much of it myself
Yeah,
outside of the
it's fun.
internet. So
It's fun. It's fun to get actual documents.
yeah. All right, great. That was the longest 10 minutes ever. I thank you for sorry about the wait. So yeah, let's just dive right back in.
Well, let me just if I want to finish up with we were talking about
Yeah,
research.
yes.
I'm going to show you exactly how it works. This was when I first started looking into Merton's death. I contacted Paul Pearson at the Merton Center at Bellarmine University, and I asked him what's the best source of information on Merton's death, and he recommended this book, The Seven Mountains of Thomas Merton by Michael Mott.
Okay.
And it was the best thing at that time, but it had been written in 1984, but it's really not very good, but it was the best available.
Yeah.
But when I did, when I got this book, see when you go in the back where the end notes are, okay, and this is really important stuff because it shows he has references for what he wrote, but I want to see these references. And it was in these end notes that I learned about letters. Like there'll be one here. There was a letter from Celestine Say to Don Flavian Burns, March 18th, 1969. I wanted to see that letter and see what Mott did is he did not represent what was actually in those letters.
Oh.
So see, when I got the actual letters, I could read some of the letters by Say were 3 pages long, single spaced. Well, Mott said that the photographs were taken after the scene had been disturbed. But when you read the letters from Celestine Stay, and there's four of them, there were six written that we know of, but there were only four that we have. But he's very clear that before anything was touched, We took the photographs to preserve the scene. So Mott knew that his chronology was wrong, and he doesn't tell you that. So by getting the actual letter, so if you're researching a particular subject and there's endnotes in the back of the book, get those documents. And see, the letters that I found in the back of Mott's book led me to more letters and other letters, because there's this back and forth. And I found out because someone in a letter would refer to another letter. And that's really how I found the photographs at Columbia.
And all of these letters are just in an archive somewhere? People kept them?
Well, they're in folders. And what they used to do, I need to do it. I've sort of got my papers set aside, but I need to put all my papers at Bellarmine, give them to Dr. Pearson so they can have a folder with letters that I've written to people. So future researchers can see my correspondence with people and put pieces together. Because the letters, a lot of letters are preserved and they're available to us, and you can.
I wonder if we need to go back to writing letters, because now people just do email and like it can just be deleted, like Hillary
Right.
Clinton.
Well, you could print your emails up. That's what I'm doing. I'm printing a lot of them, and then I'm putting them in a folder, and then eventually I'll send them down to Dr. Pearson. But things have to be preserved.
Yes.
For future researchers, and the National Archives is a wonderful place. They have so much stuff there, and so many. But sometimes it's a real labor. Like this guy Mott. This is funny. See, this in the back of here. He's got mentions these letters. Well, I found out that Mott's papers were at Northwestern University.
Okay.
So I contacted Northwestern in 2017. And they sent me a lot of his papers and letters that he references. Well, I was in Chicago about a month ago, and I went to Northwestern again because I wanted to know if there's any more things, because if there's a box of documents in Mott's papers, I want to see the folders in that box. Well, how many other folders are there, and what else is there?
Yeah.
And they couldn't even find the papers that they gave me in 2017.
Why?
And things are just not cataloged properly.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't believe they couldn't even find what they'd given me before. The guy that gave me the papers before is no longer working there. Now they have a system where if they give you something, it's logged in and they know what box they got it from that they gave it to you. But this guy in 2017, they didn't have that system in place. So they don't know what box he went into to find those papers.
So
there
if
are
we double check your end notes, we might think you're making things up.
Exactly. You should check all my end notes. And you see, Mott's papers, I found out at Northwestern, there are 52 boxes.
Wow. Okay.
Most of them are poetry because he wrote poetry. That's a lot of poetry. But, you got to, when I go to Chicago, I'm going to go into a few boxes at a time, but I want to know if there's anything else there, because he, as the biographer of Merton, he had access to a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And things could have ended up in his boxes. I just don't know. Unless someone actually goes down there and goes through the boxes and looks, we're just not going to know.
So maybe there will be a third book.
Maybe it just has to be done. I'm sorry. It's a lot of boxes, but I know what I'm looking for. See, if you read the second book, this Merton's Betrayers, there's another character in the title besides Fox let me say just a couple things about Fox first. When Fox is at the Abbey, I told you he's running it like a business, right?
Yeah.
And I got to keep the kind of the timeline in force here because we know what we're talking about. But he saw Merton as a financial asset to the Abbey, which he was.
And he wanted to go. Didn't he go to Wall Street initially, or he wanted to be on Wall Street?
He wanted that type of career. He told one of the seminarians he was interested in a banking career, but he ended up here. But he sort of lived out that life anyway. But he had a fear of Merton leaving the Abbey, and Merton was writing to other monasteries and writing to Rome and trying to get a transfer so he could go somewhere else. He wanted to get away from Fox because Merton was not a money guy, and he wasn't interested in the money or the royalties and all this business stuff. He wanted a contemplative life, and he wanted to live in a hermitage. And he and Fox really clashed. But the idea of Merton leaving that abbey kept Fox awake at night. He had anxiety that he could just walk out the gate. So he had an incentive to keep Merton there. And he could read Merton's mail, incoming and outgoing. That was just part of the procedure if you're a Cistercian monk. It goes with the territories. Somebody might find that offensive, but when you go into a monastery, you agree to that. So but he could keep an eye on Merton, so he knew. And he would have known that there was an invitation coming for him to go to Thailand. And see, because Fox had kept him at Gethsemane, unable to leave for, I don't know, like the number of years that he was the abbot was like 17 years. He never let him travel except for medical appointments in Louisville. Maybe I think he took one trip to Minnesota with Fox, and then another trip to overnight to New York, just a one-day trip. But otherwise, he was really confined to the abbey and not permitted to go anywhere. And it wouldn't look right if Fox gave him permission to go to Thailand and then he gets killed. So Fox would step down and not be the abbot, and the new abbot would give him permission to go. See, and Fox was working behind the scenes, and Merton
never
predicted
really
that,
out of power though. Like he was always pulling the strings behind.
Right. If Merton wrote that, Merton said Abbot Fox might step down, but he'll still be in charge. He'll still be running these. See, he didn't leave the abbey. Normally, when an abbot steps down, they go to another monastery. They don't stay there.
Right.
But yeah, it's just
he stayed there in like a mansion in like a really nice
he
house.
had a hermitage, a luxury place.
A luxury.
Yeah.
It was designed by some like famous
Frank Lloyd Wright, guys that worked with Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, like crazy. And when you read about it, I mean, I know that he wanted to be a hermit and he wanted to live a life of poverty, chastity, and obedience, right? That's what he signed up for. But when you read the way that he was treated for so many years by this Fox guy, I mean, the word that comes to mind is like heroic virtue. Like he really was submitting his will to this guy out of obedience. But this guy was not looking out for his best interest and was not, he had his own concerns. And it was just amazing that Thomas, because I've heard a lot of bad things about Thomas Merton, like, oh, he had a child out of wedlock. He had an affair with a nurse. Everyone brings up the bad stuff, but nobody understands how difficult it was to live under an abbot that really saw you as like a tool or like a, do you know what
he never did. I have to say, he never had a child out of wedlock. That's a rumor with no foundation in fact. And he signed signed sworn declarations that were filed in court that he had no children.
Yeah.
That's not true, but that's been repeated.
It's been repeated, yeah.
Yeah, but see, so Fox had him sign this document in November of '67, forming the Merton Legacy Trust, so that if anything happened to him and he died, everything would go to the Abbey, all the unpublished papers. And see, Merton had some distant relatives living in New Zealand, and people might have wanted.
So this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you. So was it kind of like a quid pro quo? Like if you sign over all of your royalties to our trust for the future, we'll let you leave the monastery and go somewhere else?
No, there was no deal like that. I think at that time Merton was only 52 years old. He died when he was 53, but I think when he signed that over, it was just the abbot said, I want you to sign this. And he's obedient. So he signed up for the legacy trust. I mean, who thinks you're going to die when you're 52? You think you can have another 10, 20 years. I mean, he doesn't expect to die. So,
I put in my notes,
invitation to travel hadn't been received yet. See, the invitation to travel came in January. He signed this in November. In January, the formal invitation to go to Thailand comes, and then he gets permission.
Because in my notes, I put flight risk, ? Equals trust agreement. Like, was he worried that he was going to bail and leave, and that's why he had to get him to sign over the
Yes.
He was already worried.
Well, I think he realized they were putting things in place for him to go to Thailand to get killed.
Oh my goodness.
See, this was planned. I mean, the murder is planned. So they had him sign this. They were getting everything ready, and then he gets the invitation. Then he goes to Thailand. Then he gets killed. But this trust agreement is conveniently signed in November of 67. On December 10th of 68, he's dead. And I think that sort of is an indication that he was no longer a flight risk once he's dead, because they bury him at the monastery and he's forever Thomas Merton, Gethsemane Monastery. Actually, when he left the monastery to take his trip to Asia, he was not coming back. He had permission from the new abbot to get a new hermitage, either in the redwoods of California or maybe Alaska, wherever he wanted. And he said in his letters to people, I'm still going to be a monk of Gethsemane, but he won't be a monk at Gethsemane. Mm-hmm. So he was going to get his mail, and all his business correspondence would go to Gethsemane, but he was going to live as a hermit somewhere else. He was not going back. When he left there in September of 68, he was not going back.
He was not going back.
Because they knew he wasn't coming back, except in a coffin.
So did you ever look into, like, could you find Fox's papers and find out, like, who was he working with? Was he working with the CIA, or he must have been?
I think he was working with John Howard Griffin.
And John Howard Griffin was working for somebody.
John Howard Griffin is an intelligence agent for the government.
Okay, so
that comes out in the second book. See, that's why the second book is subtitled "The Case Against Abbot James Fox and Author John Howard Griffin." You got to find a connection between the government and the monastery, and it's John Howard Griffin.
Okay, that guy. Yeah, we'll get to him. Yeah, I had one question about the trust though before we move on. I was a little confused because on page 29 it says the original trustees were Thomasine O'Callaghan, who often hosted Merton in his visits to Louisville.
Right, she was a close friend, a dear friend.
James Laughlin and Naomi Burton Stone.
They're bad people.
They're bad people? Yeah,
Naomi Burton Stone and John Laughlin, they knew about the photographs. And they told Griffin and Brother Patrick that Thomasina O'Callaghan can never know about the photographs. She shouldn't know about them. They kept them from her. But the others knew about the photographs of the stage scene. And they worked together. See, Naomi Burton Stone and John Laughlin were the New York literary crowd. They were publishing Merton's books. So they got their hand in the money too.
Okay, so when he signed over this will or whatever, was it going from those friends to the abbey?
Those three friends would manage the trust.
They would manage it.
Yes, and there's a clause in there. Okay. There's a clause in the trust. I don't remember exactly it's like an outline, like, part 2, section A or something. But there's a clause that they put in there that said that nothing would be published by the trust without the permission of the abbey.
Ah, okay.
So the abbey sort of held a grasp on things, so that Fox was very concerned that things that Merton wrote about him that might not be very charitable would never be published. See, Fox wanted to make sure, and Brother Patrick wrote a letter to Naomi Burton Stone saying nothing bad about Fox is to be published in the future, but there is a clause that we will make sure that doesn't happen.
So the money was always going to go to the abbey, but these people were going to manage the trust, and that's
right. The money that goes to the abbey, but there's also the publishing house, which Laughlin ran a company called New Directions in New York City, and his publishing house would be publishing books, so he's getting money.
Okay.
And Naomi Burton Stone is a literary agent; she's getting her cut, and the abbey's getting theirs.
Okay.
They're all
I don't think
Thomasina O'Callaghan was not in the loop for the money or the information. She was just Merton's close friend. I think that's why he had her in there. He thought she would protect him, but they were keeping secrets from her.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
That's how that worked.
Okay.
She was a really decent person, a very fine family in Louisville. Yeah.
So he gets him to sign this thing in November. He goes into Thailand in December. That's where he gets killed. So now the connection is what was this Abbot, Fox? What was his connection to the government? His connection to the government was John
Howard Griffin.
So maybe should we talk about him next, or
I think we need to talk about John Howard Griffin and how he came about, because he enters the scene right about the same time that we discussed earlier, that Merton was turning from to write about nonviolence and peace, 1961. Right at that time, I think Merton was getting the attention of the warfare state. And they sent John Howard Griffin to the Abbey of Gethsemane on assignment, I think. And he lives in Fort Worth, Texas. It's a long way to go to Kentucky to go for a retreat.
And he
And
was
he goes
already
up there.
famous. Can we explain why he was already famous? He was
Yeah,
already
sure. He was already famous. Well, he actually was famous just about that same time, 1960, 61. There was a series of articles published in a magazine called Sepia, which was a black picture magazine for the black audience. It had stories about men who dress as women, striptease and stuff. It was sort of a sexual thing, but it was written for it was like a People magazine or National Enquirer for the tabloid kind of magazine that was sold to the black community.
okay.
And it was a little bit it was not really a reputable magazine. I would say it wasn't like a real news magazine, but they did a series of articles on this guy John Howard Griffin posing as a black man and traveling in the South and getting badly mistreated by all the whites down there because the whites are so terrible, and they made them all look bad. And then he suffered all this because his skin was black. And the story, and I mean, you deal today with high school students, and I don't know if they have to read that, but when I was in high school, we all had to read that book. Everybody read that book.
I feel like I heard about it growing
We
up, but
all read
I don't
it.
think they read it anymore. But
Well, I'll tell you something, if you want to see something really funny, the comic Eddie Murphy did a spoof on it on the 25th anniversary
oh,
called White
really?
Like Me. And Eddie Murphy puts on white face and walks around and gets treated royally. And
I've seen
it's
that.
it was
And
on Saturday Night Live.
his
And it's
impression of a white person, he's like very like proper and yeah.
Yeah, and
I've
everybody
seen
gives them money and treats them. Yeah, that's a very, very funny. Eddie Murphy's a clever comic, but that's a funny spoof on Black Like Me by Eddie Murphy. I thought that was really a hoot.
that is
But
funny.
anyway, the book Black Like Me was propped up by the press. Our propaganda press really put John Howard Griffin out in front of the public, and they made it all legitimate. I mean, people believed this book. I mean, he was interviewed by Mike Wallace on CBS. He was on the Today Show, and John Howard Griffin told his story, and everybody believed it. It's really not a believable story if you think about it, but we believed it because the New York Times and everybody said it was true, and the book got assigned to all the students in the country. So everybody had to read it. They even made a movie about it called Black Like Me, starring James Whitmore. And in the early part of the book, Griffin has to get under a sun lamp with some dermatology medications to make his skin black. And then he said in the book that he went in the bathroom and turned on the light, and he saw this angry Negro that didn't look at all like me. Well, if you think about it, it would look exactly like him in blackface.
Yeah.
Because your nose is the same, your mouth is the same, your eyebrows, your forehead, your facial features, everything about you is the same except the color of the skin. It's like you got a good tan, you know?
Yeah.
So this is a ridiculous idea, but he said he went to New Orleans and stayed with an unknown person and an unknown dermatologist, and all these people helped him become black. And then he traveled to South. Well, as you get deeper into the book, it starts to get really ridiculous because, we didn't notice this. Like when I was in high school, we just believed it, you know,
Yeah.
like religion. But if you read the book carefully, you'll see that John Howard Griffin was able to do a thing he called transitioning. And that meant he could go into some bushes by the side of the road and put dye on his face and skin and come out of the bushes as a Negro and walk around and get badly treated by the white people. And then at nights, we could check into a white hotel. He would go back in the bushes, and with cold cream and tissues, he would wipe all the dye off and transform himself back into a white man. It's like Superman,
It's so
just
weird.
changing.
And
And you
And there's
can't believe this. I mean, you would leave a little black smudge behind your ear. You might miss a spot on your neck. I mean, it's just the whole thing is ridiculous. But we believed it because the news media and the big papers and the big networks, they all told us this story was true. So we believe that John Howard Griffin was the real deal and that he really did this. I don't think he did it for a day. I mean, he might have put on some blackface. Well, when you look at the pictures of him, he looks like John Howard Griffin in blackface. And, he's not going to fool anybody in the black community. They would see right through that. If you put makeup on yourself and try to impersonate a black person, they're always going to fall for that.
Yeah.
Not a chance. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's
But
very
they sold it to the American people, and people bought it. And
but there was some other sketchy stuff about him, like he was blind and then he wasn't blind
before
or
he became
something like
black,
that?
he became blind. And he was blind. He said that he was blind from an accident. He was injured in World War II. Well, I pulled his military record. It's back in the back of the book in the appendixes. There's his military record. He had no Purple Heart and no record of any wounds in World War II. None. Yet he claimed that he got, he said 3 or 4 different versions of the story. He was in a plane that crashed. He was bombed by the Japanese. It's just ridiculous.
He's just really generally not credible, but he
No,
was
he's not
propped
credible.
up by the media as the latest thing.
Right.
And so then he goes to the Abbey just apparently on a retreat. Was he even Catholic?
Well, he was Catholic. Well, it depends. I guess it depends what you mean by Catholic.
Okay.
But he had lived in France when he was young. He studied in France as a youth, and he was probably fluent in French, as was Merton. So they kind of have a connection there.
Okay.
And Merton's parents were artists, and so were Griffin's father was an Irish tenor, and I think his mother taught piano. So he had they had sort of a similar background, I think, where he could relate to Merton. But see, Griffin did espionage and intelligence work in the South Pacific, and also he went to the Mexican embassy during some riots down there. He's working for the State Department. He's a government man, basically. Mm-hmm. So he's your government connection between the Abbey and the U.S. government. I don't know if he's CIA or what he is, but he's an intelligence asset. Mm-hmm. And that's why his Black Like Me whole story became famous, because he's connected to the news media. This is the same news media that told us Oswald killed Kennedy and that told us that Merton died of accidental electrocution. This is the press you can't trust. The press that Merton said doesn't tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And Griffin is a product of that. But he was the kind of the link in between the two. And then when he went to the Abbey, he would meet with Merton, and he got Merton interested in photography because Griffin learned photography, I think, when he was in the South Pacific working in the military. And he must have been a pretty charming guy and a talkable fellow. But anyway, Griffin, another thing they need to know about Griffin is he's connected to Penn Jones. And Penn Jones is a guy who's connected to the Kennedy assassination, JFK.
Really?
Yeah, he's a really interesting character. He ended up going down to the Abbey with Griffin one time for a visit. But Penn Jones was a critic of the Warren Commission, but I would call him a critic light, sort of like Robert Stinnett had done. We knew. I mean, you can't really trust Penn Jones. He looks like he's a critic of the official Kennedy story, but he's not really. And Griffin sent Penn Jones to Asia to interview the Filipino monk that took the photographs. Mm-hmm. And he told the Filipino, I think that Merton's death had something to do with Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King assassination. I think he might have been murdered. And he's trying to fish this Filipino out. And the Filipino wrote a letter. He wrote 2 letters, actually, mentioning that this guy Jones came and interviewed him. He's a journalist, and said he thought that Merton might have been assassinated. But the Filipino said, I can't believe that would have happened. And he just he just didn't. He didn't even consider that. Wow. But see, Jones was trying to find out if the guy that took the photographs was suspicious if it was a murder.
Whoa, that is
they sent Jones all the way to the Philippines to talk to this guy. He also went to Thailand to visit the scene and to interview people. So Jones was sort of doing some research for John Howard Griffin. And then, of course, he comes back from his trip, and he doesn't write a report or anything. You don't know what happened. He was supposed to have taken photographs of the place where Merton died, but we've never seen any of Jones's photographs. There's no record of Jones anyway, of meeting with Celestine Say, the Filipino. We only know that Jones met with him because the Filipino tells us.
Wow.
But see, that there's another shady character involved here that sort of points in the direction of a government cover-up. Now, when the Merton Legacy Trust kicks in after Merton dies, John Howard Griffin was chosen to be the official biographer of Thomas Merton. This is before Michael Mott took it over, when Griffin suffered ill health and died. But Griffin would present himself to people as, I'm the official biographer. And he would write letters to Celestine Say and to the other monks that found the body. And he would want to know what people saw and what do you suspect and so on. And Griffin had all of the official records. He had the police report. He had the death certificate, the doctor's certificate, the embassy report. He had the photograph, so he knew. And one of the men that was living in the cottage was John Moffat. He was a poetry editor for America Magazine, and he was in a room above Merton's. And he had gone away that day to do sightseeing, but he was physically at that conference with Merton and Father Celestine Say and the creepy guy we mentioned earlier, Father Francois de Grun. So Moffat corresponded with de Grun and Say and everybody, and when he was trying to figure out what happened.
And if I remember correctly, in the first book, you seemed maybe a little suspicious of him, but then
Yes.
in doing more research, like in this book, I think you might say something like, but we want to make it clear, like, now that we've done more research, he really did seem like he was interested in the truth and
No, it's
not
the
part
embassy.
of
The embassy. We corrected ourselves on the embassy. We thought the embassy may have been part of the cover-up in the first book because it's a government agency, and also the Abbot Flavian Burns said that the embassy told him certain things, and we believed Abbot Flavian Burns. Later, we discovered, the embassy was really telling the truth all along, and in their report, they reported everything straight up. I think the American embassy in Bangkok was honest. I think it was Father Flavian Burns was not. Now, John Moffat and Griffin exchanged a lot of letters, and this is really detailed in the second book, all these letters, because Moffat keeps probing and saying, I don't think it was an accidental electrocution. But Griffin keeps writing back and saying, yes, it was. Yes, it was. I have documents. I have things that you can't even see because it's confidential, but it was an accident. It was an accidental electrocution. And they banter back and forth. And Moffat is really looking for the truth, I think. He seems genuine in his letters.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, in 1970, they both publish a book, and they both write things in their books that they know are not true.
Okay.
Moffat wrote things that he knew were not true, that he argued against, and Griffin said the fan was found lying across Merton's chest, which it's not. Griffin knew that. He had the photograph.
Okay.
They both got on board at the end and just sold out. Another thing that came out in those letters, because the letters from Griffin are interesting because he corresponds with a lot of people, particularly Moffat. And Griffin would say things like, I received your letter and I burned it. And I encourage you to burn letters. We don't want to leave a paper trail. This is real intelligence work. And Brother Patrick at one point said to Griffin in a letter, I think we should save some of our correspondence for the archives, Griffin said, I dread the thought of anybody ever reading my mail. And then he would destroy stuff, and he would tell Moffat to destroy letters. He told Moffat they were going to exchange cassette tapes because they could erase over them. Nobody can see what we said.
So how did you find the letters? They were in Moffat's? They were still in Moffat's papers? Because if they were burning them.
In Moffat's papers, I found correspondence from. I would find letters from Griffin here and there.
Okay.
But they're scarce, and I found some with Naomi Burton Stone, John Laughlin. I found some letters, but see, Griffin's living at Merton's Hermitage where there's a fireplace, and he's going through all Merton's journals and he's burning stuff. This is not good.
Yeah.
So you've got
Hmm.
a guy who's into destroying documents. Sometimes you had to piece things together. Like you would read a letter from Naomi Burton Stone, who would tell Griffin that she received his letter and great letter you sent, and I destroyed it. But then in her response, she would answer some questions that Griffin had might have posed in his letter, which we don't have. But because she's answering things, he asked her those things. Now she's answering.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you had to kind
Yeah.
of piece stuff together that way. But it's all done chronologically in the book,
Yeah.
and you can see how not Merton, but Griffin would approach people like Celestine Say or one of the other monks, and he would write him a letter. And Griffin was using the Abbey stationery, Abbey of Gethsemane, to give
Mm.
himself credibility.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
he's not a monk there. He doesn't
Right.
live there. But he would write a letter on the Abbey stationery. He must have gotten permission from Fox or somebody to do that. And then he'd say, I'm the official biographer and I'm working with the Abbey and I want to know what you know about Merton's death.
Right.
And see, that way, he wasn't just John Howard Griffin, Fort Worth, Texas. He's at the Abbey of Gethsemane.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was he was trying to pull everything together so he could hide everything. And he did get those negatives. And he wrote to Brother Patrick and Abbot Flavian and said these can never be shown to anyone ever. And
Hmm.
see, he kept that negative strip and it ended up in his papers up at Columbia. Big
Yeah.
mistake. He burned a lot of stuff, but he didn't destroy the negatives.
Hmm.
So it took a long time for them to become the pictures to be developed and for people to know about it. But it's there. So that's that's uh that's a good part of it. I think that there's a thing I wanted to say too about just telling the truth because Merton talked about how important it is to tell the truth. And I heard A. Michael Jones recently talking about when we tell the truth, we're in the presence of God because he said truth is a transcendental. And
Hmm.
when you witness beauty or you do something good, you're in the presence of God. And E. Michael Jones said that he heard Cardinal Ratzinger say one time that the church doesn't need this, it doesn't need that. What it needs is people willing to suffer for the truth. And Merton said that we will suffer when we tell the truth. And he's right about that. And I think that it takes courage to tell the truth. And Merton, because he was in a monastery, as you mentioned earlier, with these vows of poverty and obedience, he's not like most people where they can hurt Ellen Finnegan's income. They can put the search engines and turn them away from you, or they can harm you financially or your family. But see, Merton had no family. He had
Right.
no job that they could take. He didn't care about money. I mean, there's the only way they could shut him up was to kill him.
This is one this is something I asked Jim Douglas once. You know Jim Douglas.
Uh-huh.
He wrote JFK and the Unspeakable. I was like, Jim, and he's written all these books that are telling the truth. And I'm like, why aren't you dead? Like, why haven't they killed you? And he said, Ellen, I'll never forget this. He's like, I think I've been protected because I'm a Catholic worker. Like I've lived my life basically in poverty. I don't have anything that they can really threaten. You know what I mean? Other than my life, like they can't threaten my money or like my they can't sue me, like I don't have really anything. And I think there's like a protection there. You know what I mean? And that I think that's what they can hold over most people that get the Moffats of the world and the Griffins of the world to play the game and play along. But like you're saying, Thomas Merton, what could they have done? What could they have taken from him? He didn't have anything to take. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It had nothing to
Is
take.
is that kind of like what you're saying? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, that's true. It's they had to eliminate him, but they couldn't really harm him. Now they have done harm to him after he died because they like to bring up the story where he failed in his vows with a nurse that he was caring for him. He
Right.
felt for her, but he got out of that. But all people sin. They're all humans. Okay,
I
so
think, yeah.
but see that that his interest in a nurse does not define Thomas Merton. He's a
Yeah,
man
that,
of peace and a man of truth. And they like to just push that one thing up there and say, oh, but he was a sinner. Well, so's everybody.
mhm.
But see, they don't want people to get his message, which is the gospel of peace. They don't want people paying attention to that. So
Mhm.
they've put him in a left wing corner, if you will.
They did.
So
And then,
Merton is the
yeah.
left wing Catholic, and he's. I've heard some of these people say, "Well, if he were alive today, he'd be pro gay marriage, or he'd be this." They want him to be this, and they've put him over there. But that's Thomas Merton's not here to defend himself, and they've sort of tried to attack him after they've killed him physically. They've tried to tarnish him uh, reputation
And they did
wise.
the same thing with MLK and JFK, because the minute you bring them up to a conservative Catholic, the first thing they'll say is, well, he was a he was a scumbag.
Slander.
Right.
Right.
Like that's the first thing, and it delegitimizes everything that they
Right.
did in their lives. In their minds, it's like the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater, right?
Right.
And so they kill them again and again, like after they're dead. They kill their reputation.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to overcome, but I think in the long term, I'm looking for people to in the Abbey of Gethsemane should favor this, but they don't. They oppose canonization of Thomas Merton. That doesn't make sense. His own abbey. I mean, why wouldn't they want him to be canonized so they would have a saint on their property, a shrine?
Because they
And
don't want the investigation into his life.
well, because they've profited so much from his death and
Uh,
covered it up, they don't look good. But they need to get past that. They need to say, we made a mistake.
mhm.
And we said for years it was accidental execution, and we were wrong about that. And he was really assassinated, and he's a martyr, and he ought to be canonized. And they ought to get in front of it. Because one of the problems with the canonization, I think, for the Abbey is that a canonization process, and I've looked into it, it involves an investigation. They don't want a grave venerated if that person's not there. They would want to dig up that grave. And
Oh, I was going to ask you, did Thomas Merton get cremated or
no, no, he's in a coffin, which is
did they?
unusual. Normally, monks are put into just a cloth and put right in the ground with a little hanky over their face. But he was buried in a coffin because of the way he came back from Thailand. He'd been embalmed and put in a coffin. And, some saints' bodies are uncorrupted. Who knows? Unless you dig him up, we don't
And
know. But you could
also, you
still
could,
look at the back of his head and see if there's any
that's what
evidence
I
of
was
a
going to say.
wound.
You could still, we should, okay, we're going to run out of time. Do you want to keep going?
I don't mind.
Okay.
I think it's important that we advocate for canonization, and I think it's really in the monastery of Gethsemane's interest to advocate for canonization. They made some mistakes in the past, but we all make mistakes, and I don't hold that against them. I mean, the monks that were trying to profit off of it are gone now. There's new monks there, and they have the interest of the monastery and the glory of God and doing good. And the truth is important because, as I said in the very beginning, the truth brings us closer to God. And we want the monastery to be close to God. And it's only going to be close to God if it is interested in the truth and sharing the truth. And Merton, as a saint, would be a great asset to the Abbey of Gethsemane, the state of Kentucky, and the United States. To have him as a saint, he'd be a great example. He could be the patron saint of peace, you know,
Yes.
and
My goodness.
nonviolence. I mean, that'd be great. I really hope it can come about someday. So I wanted to just mention a couple of things because in the beginning I told you there's some news I have to share with you
Oh, yeah.
since I've
And real
seen you.
quick,
And then
do
you
you
want to do
know
a
if,
call to action?
yes, I want to get to that, but
Okay.
do you know if there's been any official moves by anyone to start the process for his canonization or like
Well, only me.
there has to
I
be
live
like a
here in
cult?
Washington D.C. I met the Apostolic Nuncio Cardinal Pierre here in Washington, and we just happened to be at an event together, and Merton's name came up, and I suggested canonization. He wrote me a letter and said that he would pray for it. So that's
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
I'll take that. That was nice. And then I sent a copy of the letter down to Dr. Pearson at Bellarmine to kind of share. We'd like to get this done.
Yeah.
But the remember Gregory Hillis, who passed away about a year ago. He was a Merton scholar, and he was speaking at Notre Dame, and someone asked the question about canonization, and he said no because the monks don't want it,
Well,
and it's
maybe
not.
they
But
don't
see, the
have a
monks shouldn't decide. I mean,
yeah, maybe it's not. I mean, because I've been a member of the Ben Salmon group for a while now and peripheral member, but I know a lot goes into that. But all you need is like a big group of people that are the cult or whatever that starts it. And then I think you have to take it to a bishop. And the
right?
bishop looks at how many people are behind this is kind of the first step. So I think we could do a website, just start there and get people to sign the petition like they did with Ben Salmon, you know?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think the Archbishop of Louisville would be a logical person, and then also the Archbishop of Bangkok, where he died. Either
Oh,
one of
yeah.
those, I think, would be fine.
I feel like Bangkok might be better because we would be maybe away from a lot of the deep state influences and
That's true.
infiltration.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, Hugh,
It can
can I
happen.
elect you to do that? Cam will get completely behind it.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
I'll put it at my website, a petition for canonization. I can do that.
Okay, but what else did so I completely agree we should get that going. But and you think the reason they don't want to is because they would exhume the body and there would
Well, I have to admit they've been telling something that's not true for a long time, and
right.
but it cleanses the soul, you know. I mean, let's
Yeah.
just admit that we made a mistake. I mean, it's not the end of Gethsemane. It'd be better, you
Yeah.
know, to just admit it and admit they were wrong.
I wonder
It's
if we
not
could
their
get
fault. It happened before they got there, you know.
yeah. Okay, so I do have some questions for you, but let us fill
Well,
us
go
in on
ahead, give me the
development.
questions. I want to hear the
Well,
questions.
one of them was, have you had any contact with RFK Jr.? Because his mother was close with Thomas Merton, and I bet he would be somebody that would get behind your books. And he's I mean, he's kind of a compromised character, but I do think he's a truth seeker.
Yeah, I can't remember if I sent him a copy of the book or not. I'd have to look in my correspondence file. I might have written to him. Uh, I have a lawyer friend that was a close friend of RFK Jr.'s brother who died of an overdose, but he knew RFK Jr. In fact, we went to a thing in DC, they always have these parties in Washington where they have like a cocktail hour with these really fancy hors d'oeuvres, like little lamb chops.
Yeah.
That big spread. I forget what it was for. It was some movement during the campaign year or something. But yeah, if you show up at an event in Washington, they always have nice hors d'oeuvres and everything else. But RFK was there. I didn't talk to him, but
Oh, it'd be great to get him a copy of your books.
I'll see if I wrote to him. I may have written to him. I write a lot of letters. I don't
Okay.
remember
Yeah.
if I did or not.
I was going to ask you about that, and then I was going to ask you, well, I think you have some developments that you wanted to inform me about, but I thought the Judy Collins thing was a good development. When didn't
Yeah.
she write a book, a song
It
about
was
your
a
book?
song. Well,
Yeah.
she said she was inspired by our first book to write a song, Thomas Merton. And she has, I mean, she doesn't have the facts exactly as we've unfolded, but she's singing about an assassination. And she believes he was assassinated. She remembers when it happened. I was a college student when she was popular a long time ago, over 50 years ago. I can't believe I would write something that would inspire her to write a song. So it was kind of a shock to me, but
That's
she's
great.
she was interviewed recently by some people that are doing a documentary.
Oh, on Thomas Merton.
Yeah, they interviewed her about Thomas Merton.
Okay, so tell us about the documentary. Are you connected to them in some way or?
They filmed me too, but they were here at my house filming me, but I don't want to say too much about it because I think these guys are very real professionals and I don't know how these things come out, but I think it's supposed to be turned in and be done on December 9th, which is tomorrow. But
Oh,
then sometimes they hold things back because they want to enter them into like the Sundance Film Festival or stuff and try to get some awards.
It's
If they
specifically
put
about
stuff,
his
if
death.
they put stuff out in advance, they can disqualify themselves. So I don't want to tell too much about it, except that I know there's that, and there's also there's another man that I've been in correspondence with who's writing a screenplay. He wants to do a dramatization and pitch it to Hollywood or streaming. I don't know what these things are, but for broadcast. But he's really interested, and I've guided him into reading things and answered a lot of questions. But so there are some things that are coming out that are a different format from a printed book, where people will be able to hear the story either as a documentary or a dramatization. So those things are positive.
And both of those things are more focused on his death, right? Not just
They're
like
both
a doc.
focused on his death,
That's
yes.
great. And they're probably, I mean, without your books, I'm sure they never would have had those ideas to do that.
Probably not.
That's
Probably
amazing.
not.
That's really
But
good.
I'm not looking for any royalties or anything. I'm just trying to get the truth told and tell the truth and share the truth. And it's so important. But we have a real obstacle is things haven't really changed a lot from the time when Merton was alive with the news media. I mean, we have more available, I think, with the internet now than we ever did as an alternative, but there's still a lot of control of information. And that's why in the second book, in the appendix, there's an article by Patricia Lefevre. And she was a journalist with National Catholic Reporter for over 40 years. She
Oh,
died, I think, 2 years ago of cancer.
oh,
But she was a real trooper. She went all around the world covering Catholic news. And she wrote a very nice review of our first book. And
oh.
she submitted it to National Catholic Reporter for publication on the anniversary of his death in 2018, which would have been the 50th anniversary. And they wouldn't publish it. They wouldn't publish it.
Well, I mean, like that's
She's not just nobody. She's been a journalist with this publication for 40 years, and they wouldn't publish her review of our book. And she gave
wow.
me permission to publish it in our book. But see, National Catholic Reporter is suppressing this story, as is EWTN and other Catholic publications. And, the Catholics deserve better. They need to get the truth from their own news media. It's supposed to be the Catholic news media. And this is a very important Catholic priest who's been assassinated, and the Catholics aren't even told about it by their own so-called Catholic press, which I think is just an extension of the Associated Press, just with a little Vatican news sprinkled in. But this isn't right for the Catholic news not to cover this story.
Well, it seems like I mean, we know that going back to the Vietnam War days, I mean, the CIA has completely infiltrated the media. I'm sure that's no different for the Catholic media. I mean,
Exactly,
it's the,
exactly. But we should let the Catholic media know that we know
right.
that they're not telling us the truth.
Are there any Catholic media outlets that you trust, aside from Catholics Against Militarism, that you trust, that you
Well,
think?
this one in Vancouver has published quite a bit on Merton. It's called it's called Island Catholic News. Now, some of these organizations, including the Catholic Worker, which has been supportive, are not technically under the auspices of the Catholic Church, but they have the word Catholic in their name. Like the Catholic Worker is not under the Catholic Church. It just has that name that Dorothy Day gave it. And I think Island Catholic News is similar. But
Right.
yeah, those two are they've been helpful. I'll tell you, just last week, maybe it's been 10 days now, but I met this man. He would be a good guest for you to interview.
Okay.
I'll tell you, his name is Patrick Henry Reardon.
Wait,
He's
I've
an
heard that name before.
well, he's been around. He's an Orthodox priest, and he's in Chicago. And I'll tell you, he's a senior editor at Touchstone magazine.
Okay.
So anyway, he wrote an article about Merton several years ago, I think 2021, and he said that Merton died of accidental electrocution. Well, I contacted him by email, and he got a little testy with me because he was at Gethsemane when Merton died. He was a Trappist monk, and he was one of Merton's first novices.
Oh, I must have read about him in your first book. That's why he sounds
No,
familiar.
I didn't. I mentioned him in the second book
Oh, okay.
because he was
Yeah.
helpful to me. Because I wanted one of the things I wanted to find out that's in the second book is when did the monks at the Abbey of Gethsemane learn about Merton's death, and when did they learn it was an accidental electrocution, and who told them that? How did
Mhm.
they learn that? And Reardon was helpful because he remembered, and so was Brother Paul Quenin helpful. They told me what they remembered, and anyway, Reardon he was a little argumentative with me at first, but I'm patient, and he turned out to be a really nice man and a very interesting man, and a very intellectual guy too. He's quite intelligent. I mentioned the eighth Psalm to me, and he started to recite it to me in Hebrew.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Wow.
can't do that. But anyway, he was. I was in Chicago. I said, I'd like to meet with you if it's possible. He said, I'll take you to lunch, and he did. And we went to lunch together. I wish I'd scheduled more time because I had an appointment at Northwestern University to go search for documents, and I had to keep that appointment, or I would have spent the whole afternoon with him. But he's elderly guy, so it'd be good to talk to him and really find out about Merton from him. He liked Fox. He told me better than Merton
What?
because he said Fox liked him. So,
Oh,
but he said Fox sent him to Rome, and I remember he told me that because he went to Rome, it changed his whole life, and he became an Orthodox priest.
okay.
I
Okay.
didn't really ask him why he left the Abbey of Gethsemane. If I had more time, that would be a good question to ask him. But I remember when Merton's coffin was brought back to the Abbey, Father Reardon and another monk stood at the coffin and kept vigil over it, reciting the Psalms.
Oh, wow.
So he's right there, and
Wow.
he lived with Merton and ate with Merton and Fox and the whole thing. He was living in
Wow.
that period,
Yeah.
and he can tell us all about Gethsemane. Uh, he told me something I never heard before. He told me that they had a shortwave radio on the campus because it was a big farm. And Fox liked to keep track of everybody. So he said Fox would listen in on the short wave to see
Oh.
what's going on. And he said sometimes the monks would play games with him. They
Uh-huh.
would make up stuff that Fox would hear that wasn't, they were just pulling his chain. But there's some funny stories there. So if you can get in touch with I can send you his email address. Maybe you can contact him. But he might want to talk as long as I've talked to you today. But
I'd love
just
that. I'd love
it'd
to
be a
hear
great
from
interview with a
somebody who
guy.
actually knew Thomas Merton and what that
Yeah,
was like.
he's an
Yeah.
interesting man. I just had the nicest time with Father Patrick Henry. And by the way, I had those photographs of Merton's body with me, and I showed them to him, and he said, "Can I have these?" And I said, "Sure." He wanted to have them.
Mm. Wow. But why didn't he like Merton? Well, I can ask him. Maybe I can get him.
Well, you can ask him. I just don't think he was as fond of Merton as he was of Fox for some reason. But it's in a monastery, it's kind of a strange world, I think. I remember there was a quote I read with someone asked a Benedictine monk what the hardest thing about being a monk was, and he said the other monks. So, you know, you're
Yeah.
living with people, it can get a little difficult. But I think, yeah, Reardon's got quite a life behind him. And he told me he entered the monastery, dropped out of high school. He was born and raised in Louisville,
Hmm.
and he went right into Gethsemane. And I think he told me he's one of Merton's first novices.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
He must be in his 90s
got to
now?
be close to 87, I would guess.
Yeah.
I'm just
Wow.
guessing, but he's up there.
I
But
would
he's
love to
he's
interview him.
healthy, and he's a real joy. He's a really nice man.
Nice. Well, thank you. I would love
And
to.
you don't know about these people. Then you like Father Celestine say, I wish I'd interviewed him, but he died in 2015. Just a
Right.
couple of years I never got to talk to him. But
Mhm.
these people, we all pass on. We have a expiration date. So some of them you got to talk to while they're still here. And I would recommend interviewing Father Patrick Reardon.
That's great. Please put me in touch. I would love
Yeah.
if he would love to talk about it, I would love to interview him.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. If you, in the meantime, if you go to Touchstone Magazine,
Yeah.
um, you can put in search Thomas Merton, and
Okay.
you'll find Reardon's article from 2021.
Okay,
And I
great.
would recommend you read that because he gives quite a bit of information about his life at the monastery with Merton just in that article, which might bring some questions to your mind that you want to follow up with.
Great. And you think he wasn't like hostile to your books or anything. He was like open to
He
them.
never read them.
Oh, he never read them. Oh,
No, I
okay.
gave it to him when I was in Chicago. He wanted them, and I gave them to him and signed them for him. He's only had them for a week or two.
Oh, that's very recent. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so he has. I asked him if he'd read them. He had not read them,
Wow, okay.
but he kind of had his mind made up because he was at the Abbey and he was told what happened,
Hmm.
and like most people, he believed what he was told. I mean, he's
Didn't
not
have
going
any
to
reason.
question that.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to follow up with him, especially after he reads your book. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what he thinks. Yeah, I wrote him
yeah,
a letter after I got home, and maybe I'll hear back from him. But I just thought he was a really nice man.
that's great. Well, so any other developments besides your relationship with him and the two
Well, there's the
documentaries,
documentary's coming. I know that's
song?
coming. And then about Judy Collins writing the song.
Yeah.
I'm doing speaking. I get sometimes I was invited to the Irish Book Art and Music Festival in Chicago, and I spoke in Indianapolis at another event. So if anybody watching this is interested in having me come and speak, I'm happy. I'll go anywhere.
Okay, great. Yeah, so how can they find you? Do you have a
Well,
website?
my website is the martyrdom of Thomas
Okay.
Merton.com,
Okay, yeah.
and Ellen Finnegan knows how to reach me.
That's true. You can always reach out to me. I have his email address. And
Yeah,
occasionally he shows up in a Teach to the Text class as well. So I can always
yeah.
yeah. We read the Iliad together this summer, so
We
that was
did, and now you got Plutarch. You got good stuff.
I know it's a lot, but I love it.
It's funny, those books, when I was in school, they weren't always assigned, but I held an older brother that was an English major, and he was always putting Shakespeare and these things in front of me and saying, "You got to read this." And he got me reading those things.
We just did a class in November with adults on the play Agamemnon, and I was thinking about it. I was thinking about this book and my interview with you. I don't know if you ever read that one. It's about when Agamemnon comes home from the war and he gets killed by his wife.
Yes.
So normally in Greek tragedy, the chorus is always speaking as one, and they're all speaking the same words, and it's always a group. And in this one, it's like the elders of the town are the chorus. And we got into a conversation because there's something interesting that happens right after he's killed. The chorus splits up, and Aeschylus has them speaking as individuals, and they're they're all throwing out ideas. There's like 8 different lines, and one person goes, "We should find out. We should run in there and find out what just happened." And then the next person says, whatever is done is done. We should just like basically whatever's done is done. Nothing can change it now. And then the next person says something like, I should have brought it. I should have brought the play. The next person would say something like, we better not catch the killer in the act because then something might happen to us. And then the next person, so it kind of Aeschylus shows like what happens in the aftermath of this act of violence.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because he makes the chorus split up and it's like there's 8 different lines by 8 different people. And then they come back together in the ninth line and they all say, "This is what seems best to us. Let's find out what happened to the king." And we got into an interesting conversation because I thought I've always interpreted that to be that Aeschylus was kind of showing that you have to find the facts first before you decide what to do. And so I was like, he's showing kind of like the development because he wrote about the development of the justice system. And I'm saying, so I said, I think he's trying to show us that before you act, you need the truth. And another woman in the class, a homeschooling mom actually had an interesting take on it. And she said, I think that this is the chorus's way of abdicating responsibility because she said it's almost like they could run in and find out what happened right away, but they're like delaying. She interpreted it to show that they're kind of like going to use the investigation as a way of acting like they're doing something when they're not really doing what they should be doing.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And it was just a great discussion. And it kind of reminded me of what happens now in when something like this happens, Trump almost got assassinated or Charlie Kirk got killed or whatever, whenever these things happen, there's almost like a ritual of a faux investigation that we immediately launch into. And it's almost like a ritual that isn't a real pursuit for the truth, but it satisfies everybody's need. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Merton said that when Kennedy was assassinated.
Really?
Yeah. It's in Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. Do you have that book?
I do. Yeah, I
Well,
love that book.
look up 1963. It's November 30th. So it's about a week after the assassination. And he says something about this nightclub owner killing the assassin. He said, if you could believe that. And then he said, but for right now, people just want it settled. They
Yeah,
want it settled. And we'll see. And then he asked the question, but will it stand? And I thought that was interesting because when I was alive, then I was in high school. Uh, it was a sophomore. And I mean, I just thought my parents and the teachers they would find out what happened. I didn't think I was just a kid.
yeah,
But they didn't find out what happened. And everybody just went along. Like Merton said, they just wanted it settled. And the news
right.
media just told us that this is what happened, and everybody was satisfied that it was settled. It was
Yeah,
just settled. And that was better than, I mean, if it wasn't settled, what are you going to do? I mean, who wants
right.
to go? What are you going to do if President Johnson and other like the FBI have just murdered your president? What are you going to do? I mean, that almost begs you to do something really big, and
Right.
nobody wants to do that. So we just wanted it settled. And I was really amazed that Merton wrote that on November 30th, because I don't know anybody else that said what he said at that time. I mean, we all just thought it was settled, but Merton didn't.
He got
He's
it.
the only one.
That's why at the beginning of this interview, when you're rattling off the dates of his life, 1915, 1941, I am always shocked to hear those dates of his life again because when you're reading his writing, it's like he could be writing today. And it's like he's so modern, even though he lived back in that time. It's like he was 100 years ahead of everyone else in understanding the mass media, in understanding the way that truth gets concealed. And I mean, he would not be surprised at all at what's happening on the internet with so much disinformation and misinformation. And, I mean, he would be like, well, yeah, this
I've
is
sort
just
of
par for the
adopted his
course.
lifestyle because I started quite a while ago. I stopped watching the news and listening to the news. I don't
Mhm,
read newspapers. I
mhm.
don't read it. I'm not a news consumer at all. And neither was Merton because he was in the monastery. But I still know that Charlie Kirk died. I mean, you can't avoid it. People just you
Yeah,
you bump into somebody, they tell you. I mean, you're going to hear it just like Merton would hear the news, even though he didn't read the news or watch the news. And I'm not a news consumer. My brother said to me once, "Well, how do you know what's going on?" Well, I know, like Merton, I think I know more about what's going on than my brother does because he's watching the news,
right. It's
getting
confusing
bad
you.
information,
Yeah,
and you're bombarded with so much disinformation, you can't see the truth. So yeah, I don't watch the news. I have no time for it. I'm not even interested.
yeah.
But I kind of know I mean, I know who was elected president. I know the presidents. I know things anyway. But I also think I know more about reality, objective reality, than most people do
Hmm.
because I'm not getting the propaganda fed to
Right.
me. I'm not taking it in. And
Yeah.
that's a good thing to divorce yourself from.
Yes.
You're
Otherwise,
better off reading the scriptures and
that's what
reading
I've
the
often thought
Psalms.
about. Like
Yeah.
these people, like, I'm skeptical of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and stuff, because it seems to me that I remember having this thought many years ago, actually, with Tucker Carlson. I was like, people like him that are supposed to be journalists, um, they never there's never a call to action. They never report on things and then say, here's what you should do. Call your senator. Here's what you should do. Run for like there's never a plan of action. And
Mm.
it's always just like you said, stuff that they're putting out there to be consumed, but not really meant to change anything. And I was like I looked at his 9/11 documentary for like 10 minutes. And I was like, I was immediately skeptical of it because he's acting as if he's the first one to investigate
Yeah,
9/11.
I started to watch that. I might have made it to 10 minutes, but I didn't watch it all.
I was like,
There's
there's been
nothing there.
25 years worth of investigation and reporting and research on this. If you really wanted to bring the truth out, he would be telling us what has been found out in the last 25 years by the real investigators, the real people who are seeking the truth. He's acting like none of that ever happened. And he's the first person to open this investigation. And I was like, that immediately discredited him in my mind.
That's a
You
good
know,
point.
you
Yeah.
know, because there's a lot out there, and he's not reporting on the reporting that's been done. And so
Right.
it immediately had that feel to me of information that's not really information, an investigation that's not really an investigation, but it's has the appearance of it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And Candace Owens seems to be just drawing people into endless rabbit holes of facts and information, but it's not
Yeah,
truth. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? I don't
yeah.
know.
It's cloudy. It stirs up stuff with it. Yeah, it's endless. The truth you can get to much more quickly.
Like you said, I think you'd be better spent, your time would be better spent than listening to hours of podcasts, reading the scriptures.
Well, the scriptures, it really um, tells you what's going on today. I mean, I don't know if people can get that, but I know. Uh, I'll give you an example. Just see, I'm an entertainer, and in Washington, I used to go to, I mean, everywhere, and like the White House, I used to go down there and entertain in the East Room before they tore it down.
Really?
But
Did you get invited to the White House?
oh yeah, oh, I
Oh,
was down there a lot.
interesting.
I was doing parties and I was entertaining families. I do family entertainment, but I would know all the embassies in Washington. The senators would have a Christmas party and for their families, and then I would be at the National Gallery of Art. I did lots of stuff like that. And I was very popular, with the
Oh,
Supreme Court justices and everybody.
really?
But then, yeah, really. But then, and I remember the first time I went to the White House, I called my mom. I said, "Mom, I'm going to the White House," and she was excited. I was excited. But Alan, after I started to focus my attention on the truth about our reality and telling the truth, Merton said, I don't remember his exact quote. He said, "You'll be cut. You're going to go up against." He says it this way: "Our first duty is to human truth and its existential reality, and this sooner or later brings us into confrontation with system and power, which seek to overwhelm the truth." And I ran into that power, and I'm banned from the White House now. I'm never get invited again, ever,
Why?
because I tell too much truth, and I
Oh,
told too much truth in the past. I went up against the FBI and the Justice Department and the press corps here, and you know, that you just don't do that. And it'll hurt you financially,
mhm.
and other ways. And so I don't get invited to things. I don't really mind because, to me, as I look back now, I think of King Herod's birthday party. You remember where they brought in the head of John the Baptist?
Uh-huh.
If you were there, you'd probably say, we got a babysitter. We have to get home. Leave now. But see, if you listen to that scripture, nobody leaves the party.
Yeah.
Yeah, and who's there? They're called the leading men of Galilee. Well, the leading men of Washington are at the White House for dinner. And I'm not invited. But see, I don't belong at King Herod's birthday party.
Hmm.
I don't want to be there.
Hmm.
Now, the people that are there want to get invited back next year. They want to eat the food that's good and they want to have the music and all the fine stuff. But, that's not really where we belong. But a lot of people aspire to get there. They want to be there. But I think of going to the White House as going to King Herod's birthday party. And
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
want to be there. So I'm fine that I don't get invited anymore. Uh, Financially, I'm okay. I'm not hurting, but I mean, I just don't have the connections I used to have, and I'm not invited to the places I used to be invited. But I'm fine with that. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not even welcome at the Abbey of Gethsemane.
You
You
were
know,
you were kicked out of there.
I got kicked out of there, and that's okay because I'm about the truth. Okay, and so that's what interests me, and I know Saint Augustine. There's another part of the scripture where the blind man, the Jews were trying to find out how he got his sight, and
Mhm.
he acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah, so they threw him out of the temple. But Saint Augustine said that those that the temple casts, or the synagogue casts out, he said Jesus takes in.
Mhm.
So getting kicked out of King Herod's birthday party is not the worst thing that can happen to you.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
Could be the best thing. Could be the best
it
thing that
could
happened.
be. And I think it's been better for me but if you tell the truth about things, uh, people won't like you. It's sometimes your own family and your friends, and you won't get invited to certain things, and that's just part of it, you know.
Yeah.
But and I mean, Merton maybe took it to the extreme by living in a hermitage in a cloistered monastery, but you will be sort of put in the hermitage or put into the cloister if you tell too much truth. But that's a good thing, really, because as they say, and Jones said, the truth brings you closer to God, and you want to be in the presence of God. And the truth comes from God. All truth comes from God. It doesn't come from men; it comes from God. So you want to tell the truth because you're going to be moving closer to God,
Hmm.
and it's worth pursuing. If you seek the truth, you'll find it, and it will take you where you need to be. So
Hmm.
I'll leave it at that. That's the best thing that can happen to you.
I love that. Thanks, Hugh. You'll always be welcome here. I love having you as a
Thank
guest. I love talking to you.
you. Yeah.
Um, somebody recently told me of the three, there's three transcendentals, goodness, beauty, and truth.
Okay.
And they said that good, I don't remember what goodness leads to, but they said that beauty leads to peace and truth leads to action. And so I think that I think that's really helpful is that when we know the truth, we feel compelled to act, to do
Oh
something.
yeah, it just comes out of you. When you
Yeah.
know it's just going to come out, you're just going to. It's just you have to proclaim it, and
Yeah.
when you're telling the truth, you're proclaiming the gospel.
Hmm. Right.
Maybe you're not actually quoting the scripture, but when you tell the truth and you refuse to go along with the lies that are put out there by the powerful people with money, when you turn away from the lies and tell the truth, you are really you're proclaiming the gospel.
Yeah. So what would your call to action be for people listening if there
Well,
were,
I think just seek the truth, try to find the truth about things, and then share the truth with others. But it's oftentimes it's not what it appears to be. There's as you said, maybe with Candace and Tucker, you're getting a sort of a you could be led this way or that without really you have to be pretty stubborn about it, about finding the truth. But I think it's knowable. It's fine. You can find it, and
hmm.
you have to seek it, and you have to look for it. And when things don't look quite right, you just you want to know. I had sometimes. Well, this is the strangest thing that happened to me one time. I was in Japan.
Hmm.
My wife was Japanese, and we were walking down a street, and there was a woman holding a sign in Japanese, and she was sitting there outside of a bank. And I walked by her. I couldn't even read this thing. My Japanese is okay to get around, but I could not read that sign. And we went about a half a block, and I just stopped in my tracks and I said, we got to go back. I said, I want to see what that sign said. Because I wondered, why is she sitting there holding that sign?
Yeah.
What is it? I was curious because, see, sometimes when things don't look quite right or they look a little odd, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And asking you to come look,
Yeah.
come and see, right? Come and see.
Yeah. So what did it
So,
say?
yeah, so I went to see, and it turned out that the sign was about her husband who'd been killed.
Hmm.
He worked at the Sumitomo Bank, and I told her I wanted to have tea with her and my wife. We went to a tea shop, and she told us that her husband worked at the bank and some money had been embezzled. And her husband was blamed for stealing the money.
Oh.
And then they said he committed suicide. And
Oh.
she said, that's not true. My husband did not steal the money and he didn't kill himself. Well, she couldn't get the Japanese press or anybody to cover her story.
So
Nobody
she's
would
just going to
listen to
sit there
her.
with a
She was
sign.
left with a sign on the sidewalk, just
Wow.
holding this sign. And I thought, she's trying to tell the truth. It's like the voice in the wilderness, right?
Yeah.
John the Baptist. And I just knew she had the truth on that sign, even though I couldn't read it. I couldn't read the sign. I knew she had the truth in her hands. That's why she was sitting there.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wanted to hear her story.
Wow. That's a great symbol for what it is to tell the truth most of the time. You're not going to be given the platform,
No,
mass reach and mass
she's
media, right?
doing what she could do, but she caught my attention because
Yeah.
I'm looking for the truth. And
Yeah.
I notice stuff like that. I notice when somebody's holding a sign like that. I hear a little voice when somebody's speaking up about some
Yeah.
injustice or something. And they're not on the network television.
Yeah.
They're right beside you.
I think we have less than a minute left. Here's the book once again, Thomas Merton's Betrayers, The Case Against Abbot James Fox, and author John Howard Griffin, about what was going on at the Abbey of Gethsemane that created the situation for Thomas Merton to go to Bangkok and led to kind of everything else. Great research. Thank you for pursuing the truth and sharing it with us,
And
Hugh.
my co-author, David Martin.
And David Martin as well, yes, who I have invited on before, but he said he couldn't come. So
He's having difficulty. Yeah.
for both of them. But
Thank
God
you,
bless
Alan.
you and your work, and thanks for the great conversation today.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we'll talk to you again soon. Happy
All
Feast of the
right.
Immaculate Conception as well.
Bye.
Bye.